Just recently, the Pentagon spokesperson, John Kirby, stated that America gave aircraft to Ukraine. And John Kirby just had to retract what he said, and he said that he spoke in error, and he didn't really mean aircraft. What he really meant to say was that America gave parts to Ukraine, aircraft parts to the Ukrainians. And you have to ask yourself, why would America be worried about Russia thinking that the U.S. has given aircraft to Ukraine? And really, it's because America is scared of Russia. Poland has said that it is willing to give away some of their MiG jet fighters to Ukraine as long as America gives to Poland some F-16 fighter jets to replenish its air force. And America is very hesitant to do this. Why? Why would America be hesitant to give Poland some of its F-16s as long as Poland gives away some of its MiG fighters? America is hesitant to do this. America doesn't really want to do this because America is scared of Russia. And the reason why is because Russia has the ability to destroy the United States. And Russia is scared of America because Russia knows that America has the capability to destroy the Russian Federation. This is why Russia has done wars, and America did very little to intervene, or really did nothing to intervene. And this is why America has done wars, and Russia did really nothing to stop them. When the United States, NATO, bombed Yugoslavia, Russia did not do anything about it. When America invaded Iraq, Russia did not do anything about it. When NATO bombed Libya, Russia nor China didn't do anything about it. And when Russia invaded Georgia, America didn't stop it. And now Russia is at war with Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine, and America did nothing to stop it. Why? Both countries are afraid of each other because both countries know that they are both an existential threat to each other. And so I have hope that America and Russia will not go to war with each other. I have hope, given their history, given the fact that America and Russia were allies in both of the world wars against the Germans. Given this history, I have hope. I have hope. I was thinking about something today. I read a book on the genocide of the Polish people during the Second World War. You know, the extermination of the Poles by the Third Reich, by the Ukrainian fascist members of the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which was founded by Stepan Bandera and other nationalist thugs like Andrei Melnik. And it was a great book. It was called Poland's Holocaust by Tadeusz Petrovsky. Excellent book. Excellent book. Very depressing book, but extremely educational and informative, and really to a certain extent inspirational. Not that I find inspiration in reading about the deaths of people, but I found inspiration in the resistance of the Polish people against fascism. And I also saw in this book inspiration to continue to look at what has been taking place in Central and Eastern Europe. Central Europe, Poland, Germany, Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Belarus. And as I was reading this book, it took me a while to read the book because it's a very long read. And you know how books conventionally have on their pages just one block of text? Well, this book would have 2 columns of texts on each page. So it was a long read. It was like reading Josephus. And so it took me months to finish it because I would read it on and off. And the book talked about what the Soviets did. It talked about what Belarusian fascists did, Lithuanians did. But most of the book is actually dedicated to talking about what the Ukrainians did against the Polish people in Volhynia, East Galicia, Lvov, etc. And it talked so much about what the OUN did, what the UPA did, what Stepan Bandera did. And then in the end of the book, it talked about how in Ukraine there is a resistance to acknowledging what the OUN did, what the followers of Bandera did during the Second World War. Because in Ukraine, they want to maintain this image of Bandera as if he is simply a symbol of resistance to Russian expansionism and a symbol of independence. And I remember as I was reading this book, I thought to myself, why am I reading this book? No one is talking about Ukraine. I mean, people were talking about Ukraine. People always talk about Ukraine, but it wasn't. Ukraine was not a headline at this time when I was reading this book. And I was thinking, why am I reading this book? Right? Why is it relevant that I'm reading this book? But I continued to read it because I wanted to learn about this. Because Ukraine has been Ukrainian nationalism has been an interest of mine since 2015 when I really started looking into this. And after I got done reading the book, I wanted to write an essay on the massacre of the Polish people by a Ukrainian fascist. And so as I began writing it, when I started writing this essay, I thought to myself, why am I writing this essay, right? What is the point? I mean, it's not relevant. It's not really relevant. Ukraine is not a headline right now. It kind of started to become, but still, what was the point of talking about Ukrainian nationalism? What was the point of talking about the massacre of the people of Volhynia and of East Galicia? What was the point of it all? But I wrote it anyway because I wanted to tell people what led up to the slaughter, what type of rhetoric was being said, what type of politics was being manifested, what type of rhetoric was being expressed. I wanted to show people the stages that occur, that transpire prior to a massive massacre taking place. And so I wrote the essay, and it was about 11,000 words. It took me about 2 weeks to write it. And not too long after this essay was published, the war broke out. And I thought to myself, well, now it's relevant. Ukrainian nationalism is relevant. The amazing thing is that before this war broke out, mainstream media outlets talked a lot about Azov. I mean, we've been talking about the Azov Battalion and Ukrainian right-wing nationalism since 2014. It's been a major topic since that date, since the Crimean takeover and since the civil war in Donbass broke out. And the nationalists were always referred to as far right, and I think it was Time magazine that described Azov as a well-networked organization, and a lot of the mainstream news outlets were speaking of Azov as if it was a very well-organized, well-armed group. Then after the war broke out, they began to minimize it all. All of a sudden it was, all of a sudden Azov Battalion really wasn't completely a Nazi organization. All of a sudden it was like, well, maybe like 20% of the organization are actually Nazis. The rest of them are just nationalists. Stepan Bandera it's not really a big deal that Ukrainians glorify Stepan Bandera, because Bandera is simply a symbol of independence and resistance to Russian tyranny. And so the reason why they glorify Bandera is not because he killed people, but because he has just become this national icon of independence. And so we can't really critique this sort of cult of personality. But then, I remember getting into an argument about this with a Ukrainian guy, hardcore Ukrainian nationalist, and he is, I'm not going to give his name out because he's kind of a public figure, but he's a member of a Ukrainian punk band, and him and I got into it, and because he saw what I was posting, and he wrote me, and he said, you're wrong, and this and that, and him and I went at it for a while, and He told me, he said, Bandera is simply a symbol, an icon in Ukraine. We don't praise him for whatever crimes he may have done or for whatever actions he may, bad actions that may have happened in the past and all that. And I asked him, I said, do you actually believe that the OUN did crimes? And he said, well, sure, but, in certain instances, self-defense was being done. It's like, that's a Weasley answer. And then I told him, I said, if Bandera is merely an image of independence, and you guys there is no sort of praise of the crimes that he committed, or there is no glorification of the crimes that he may have committed, or really no denial of the crimes that he may have committed, then why did Ukraine ban a movie on the Volyn massacre, on the massacre of Volhynia? Why? Why did they ban this film? The name of the film is called Volyn, but to the English speaking audience, they changed the title to Hatred. You can watch it for free on Amazon. I highly recommend it. Although it's a little bit soapish in the beginning, the film was well done. But why would Ukraine ban this movie? And he didn't answer the question. But the reason why Ukraine banned the film was the same reason why Turkey would ban a movie on the Armenian genocide. It's because Ukraine glorifies murderers, mass murderers, glorifies fascist killers, and it's part of their cultural ethos. It's part of their identity as a society. He is one of their heroes. The fact is that under the Zelensky government, it was proposed to build a mausoleum dedicated to the heroes of Ukraine. And amongst these heroes are Stepan Bandera, Roman Stupovich, and Andrei Melenik. All of these guys were mass murderers. So nobody wants to look at the elephant in the room, and that is the fascist political cult in Ukraine. Nobody wants to look at that now, because the hip thing, the trend thing, is to just point the finger at Russia. And the reality is that in this whole game of Russian expansionism or American expansionism, it basically comes down to one thing, and that is America tells Russia, if you put your hand on one of our countries, we are going to start violence through a proxy, of course. And Russia says, America, if you try to get some country that's important to us, some country that's within our sphere of influence, into NATO, we are going to put our soldiers there. And that's what's been going on for decades, since the end of the Second World War. Central America, communism was spreading within Central America. America armed the death squads, and there was massive bloodshed. Russia says, okay, America, you have Saudi Arabia, we have Iran. America arms Israel. Iran will back Hezbollah, and Iran is a proxy for Russia. NATO wanted to include Georgia into its alliance, and Russia invaded Georgia. NATO was talking about including Ukraine, but I doubt that was going to happen anyway. But NATO talked about including Ukraine into its alliance, and Russia invaded Ukraine. It's a game of empires. Now, I don't like calling it a game because people actually die, but it's a struggle. It's a vying between empires. And at the same time, of course, innocent people suffer. Innocent people in Ukraine suffer. Innocent people in Yemen suffer in these proxy wars. But that's really the bottom line. It's a vying between empires. But in this vying of empires, the dark side of our proxy is hidden. And right now, the dark side of Ukraine is either being hidden or it's being minimized so that people don't pay attention to it. But America is afraid of Russia, and that's why it would rather just arm a proxy as opposed to actually directly going against Russia, because it would be absolute suicide. And while we're all talking about Russia, we're not talking about the other monster that is raising its ugly head back from the dead, and that is the monster of fascism. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.